This video is going to demonstrate how to modify existing parts, relocate different features of that part, be able to copy a part, and just generally modifying the parts. So this job is a closet job that has a left corner unit and a right corner unit. The software that generated the parts for this did not automatically generate backs for these two corner units, and we want to add backs to them. And to be able to make this happen, three parts here, the corner fixed shelves, these make up the top, a middle shelf, and then the bottom shelf, or the top shelf, middle shelf, and bottom shelf. The back needs to fit in between the top shelf and the bottom shelf. The middle shelf, I need to chop off 3/4 of an inch off of the back right and 3/4 of an inch off of this bottom. And I'm going to need to do that for the left unit and the right unit. And to make this easier to see, and right now we have everything nested across a total of 13 sheets, and I only want to work on 2 parts at a time. I'm going to modify or hide or remove some of the parts by right-clicking and selecting View Parts List, using the drop-down box to select the material that I want to be working on. I'm going to uncheck all of the units, or all of the parts here. I get a warning that at least one part needs to be selected. I can understand that. I do know the unit number for the particular units that we're working on is unit number 99. So I'm going to just use and click on the header for unit number, and it's going to sort my list by that unit number. It is the corner fixed shelves that I need to modify, and there is going to be 2 units for this. So there's 3 for the left side, and then there are 3 for the right side. So I'm going to put a check in, one from the right side, one from the left side. Once those 2 items are checked, I'm going to close the parts list and click Nest. That is going to nest and hide all the other parts and only nest the 2 parts that I had checked. I can now use the move function, just going to move these 2 parts into the sheet a little bit just to give me a little bit of working room. First, I'm going to remove or knock off that 3/4 of an inch right there. And I do know that is 3/4 because I've measured that before, and I see that's 3/4, typically for the partition to fit in there, as it would need to have the holes to support the adjustable shelving. So I'm going to draw in a rectangle, starting in the top off of the part, bringing it down and selecting it to be snapping to the end point. That new shape has become green because it has no depth. Anything in green is above the 0 plane, and anything that is the black lines is within the cutting plane, and anything that is highlighted red is below or exceeds the material thickness. It also added in a new part for that rectangle that I just drew. I want that part to be grouped or combined with this line or the shape there of that corner unit shelf. To be able to combine those together, I need to select the perimeter cut of that part and uncheck that that is going to be the perimeter cut. I'm going to make that change, and notice when I select that part again, it does not click perimeter cut. And I now want to have, this is my part that I want to have that associated with, and typing the letter S is going to now regroup this rectangle to this part. And I can see that default part has now left our list. And when I select on that part, that rectangle is now also being selected. So that has combined those 2 together. I now need to select the main shape and then what I want to trim away. I'm going to come down to the unit. I'm going to use this bottom right. It's going to use the first selected shape as the main shape, and this dotted line is what it's going to keep. So that is just knocked off that 3/4, and that whole shape, new shape now just became at the 0 level or at the top of the material. We'll correct that in a bit. I'm going to draw in and sketch in another rectangle, this time starting on the bottom left outside of that part, sketching over and snapping it to the bottom right of our part. And again, we had that part, new part added, so I'm going to uncheck the perimeter, make that change, selecting the two shapes, typing the letter S, now combines that back into or groups this back with the main part. I now want to move this shape up 3/4 in the Y direction, and I'm going to move it to the right just a bit. So to the right would be a X direction, so I'm just going to say 1, but in the Y direction, I want to be precise about that. I want to move it up 3/4 of an inch. I am working in relative, and then selecting move. Once that is done, again, selecting the main shape, holding the shift key down, selecting the other shape, coming down and clicking union, we have now made that part 3/4 of an inch smaller by knocking off 3/4 of an inch off of the back side. I now need to change the depth of this from 0 back over to 3/4. It is not a negative value because it's asking for the cut depth, not the location of it, but the depth. And we are going to be a total depth of 0.75. Once we've made that modification, I want to hit change depth. That is now not showing green anymore. I'm going to do the same thing for this bottom unit. And I'm going to do this one just a little bit differently. As we noticed when we had this part, it created that extra part for us. This time, using the mouse to click the drawing rectangle up to the right of that part, and instead of snapping directly there, I'm going to have the mouse up. My mouse button is still down. I'm going to release the mouse when it is in the interior of the part. That is automatically going to group that shape with this part. And we could see that by when we click on it, that rectangle also becomes selected and that extra part was not added. But I now need to move this part to that shape to that lower corner so I could use that to whack that end off. I'm going to use the move function. I'm going to move from one point to the endpoint of that rectangle to the endpoint there. Again, shift, selecting multiples. I'm going to do the same exact thing across the bottom. And again, mousing up or have the mouse up when it's in the interior will not create that extra part, will prevent a little bit of a step. I first have to select the part, then click move. And those values are still here. So I don't have to hit move. I could just type the arrow up and then I'm going to move it to the right. And it moves or bumps that shape by the distance that I have set. So anytime I click the right arrow, it is going to move 1 inch to the right. Anytime I click the down arrow, it is going to move 3/4 down, or the up arrow, it will move 3/4 up. So now selecting both of those shapes and creating a union again and going in and modifying the depth. To make it a little bit easier to see in the parts list that those are the two parts that I have modified, I'm going to change the name, and I'm just going to take the word pie out of it to be corner fixed shelf. Once I've made that change, I'm going to hit save. I'm going to do the same thing on this other part. I could either, to select the parts, I could either click on the part itself and notice that it changed, or I could click on the wording of that part, deleting the word pie and clicking save. Now cleaned that up, and when we go to the main parts list for that material, we see it is now just corner shelf. I'm going to uncheck that corner shelf and add in another corner pie, and then do the same thing for the other one. But again, they're all kind of scattered in this list. I could have, again, click the top unit or just search through that list. I also want to check an item for the back. So now I have 3 parts, and that back is not for the corner cabinet, that or unit. I have to modify the sizing for that back to make it work with that corner unit. So once I hit close and then nest, we're only going to get 3 parts visible. It is the back and then the 2 corner units. So to make it a little bit easier to modify, I'm going to move this back off to the left. I'm going to right click and make a copy of that part, and then use the move to move it off to the right. We have the 2 backs now listed here, and I'm going to rename one of those backs to be corner back and hit save. I'm going to leave it and make use of the partition that we had here. So the way I'm going to work this is one back needs to go from this point to this point. Then we will need another back size to go from this point to this point. So I'm going to first start with this leg right here, and I'm going to get a distance. So the distance for that is going to be 15¼ inches. And currently, this part is at 13½. So it is going to get bigger by 15¼ minus 13½ by 1¾ of an inch. And we'll see why that 1¾ is an important number to remember in the next steps. So I want to change the size of this to be 15¼ So selecting the shape that I want to resize, the anchor point is going to be the lower left, and I'm going to enter in the value of 15.25, then click change. That just made the outer boundary of that part to be 15¼ inches, but the cam hole did not move with that. So now I'm going to do a sweep select to select only those 2 holes. And then if you remember that number of 1¾ I want to move that selection 1¾ to the right. So that would be a positive number to the right, and selecting move, and it is going to move that off to the right. Now it also moved the Y up 3/4 of an inch, which I did not want. So I could either do a Control Z to undo and set that to 0, or just move that down to be a negative 3/4, and I do not want to move the X at all. And so this is going to move that back down that 3/4 of an inch. So that gives us the one back for the section here. I now want to make another copy of that part. Selecting move, and I'm going to move it off to the right side. I'm going to do the exact same thing, but measure the distance of the larger size, which is 30 1/4. So we are going to go 30 1/4 minus the 15 1/4, which is going to be 14 3/4. And again, that 14 3/4 is what we will end up having to move those holes off to the right. So to resize that outer shape there, I'm going to select the border that I want to resize, and I'm going to resize from 15 1/4 up to 30 1/4 inches, selecting change, then selecting only the holes, and learning from my previous mistake, I'm going to set that Y value to 0, and I want to move only the X in a positive to the right 14 3/4. Selecting move, those holes are now moved off to the right by the distance that I've moved it and put in there. We are now completed. I just need to make another duplicate copy of this for the opposite corner unit. So I'm just going to right click and select copy part, and do the same thing on this. Right click, copy part. I don't have to move it because I could just come up here and nest, and it will just nest those parts that I have checked. So we can now see that we have all of the backs that we added. I am now ready to have my modified parts incorporated with all the other parts for the job. So I'm going to right click, view parts, again with the material. I'm going to check the box to make sure all parts are selected, closing the parts selector, and then again click nest. And notice we originally started with a total of 13 sheets. We now have 15 because we have added the backs added more parts to the job. So that is a video showing how to move parts, modify parts, resize, and relocate features within a job.